There's a moment every serious grower dreads, and it comes without warning. A plant that's been outproducing everything else in the row, heavier, greener, further along than anything around it, just stops, no warning the day before. One morning the flowers that should be opening haven't opened, the clusters that should be swelling haven't moved in 3 days, and the grower standing in front of it, the one who did everything right, has no idea why the strongest plant on the property just shut down. By the end of this, you'll know exactly what happened and exactly what would have prevented it. Welcome to Forgotten Harvest Vault. Today we cover the 3 techniques commercial tomato growers use that most home gardeners never learn. Before we get into the first one, if you've ever had a plant do this and never figured out why, hit subscribe now, because by the 3rd technique, the answer is going to be obvious. Let me know where you're watching from and what zone you're in. Here's what almost every home garden tomato plant looks like by mid-July. Dense, bushy. Every shoot the plant ever produced, still attached, still growing, still competing for the same root system and the same sunlight. Most people assume this is what a healthy plant is supposed to look like: more growth, more leaves, more everything. It feels like abundance. It isn't. What's happening inside that plant is a resource fight. A tomato plant only has so much energy to distribute at any given moment, and every extra sucker left to grow into its own branch is a new claimant on that energy. Left alone, a tomato plant will grow those side shoots indefinitely, and on a commercial length production season, the main stem of an unpruned indeterminate variety can stretch anywhere from 40 to 50 feet by the time the season ends. That's not a typo. 40 to 50 feet of vine, all needing to be fed by the same root mass. Commercial growers don't allow that to happen, and the reason isn't about tidiness, it's about where the plant's energy goes. Removing those extra shoots, the suckers growing in the crook between the main stem and each leaf, forces the plant to put its resources into fewer, more productive points instead of spreading them across dozens of competing branches. Left unpruned, a plant will still produce fruit, sometimes even more fruit, by sheer count, but that fruit comes out smaller because there are more mouths at the table, splitting the same meal. Here's the part that trips up people who think they've already got this figured out. Pruning too little costs you fruit size. Pruning too much costs you the fruit entirely. Both mistakes look identical from a distance, a struggling plant, and only one of them is fixed by cutting more. Removing growth from a living plant, cutting away tissue it already invested energy into building, sounds like it should weaken the plant. It doesn't. Pruned tomato plants come into production earlier, hold up better under disease pressure, and critically, for a commercial operation trying to sell fruit at a premium produce, individual tomatoes that are noticeably bigger and more marketable than what an unpruned plant of the same variety, same soil, same age would give you. There's a second benefit most people never think about until it costs them a crop. A tangled, overgrown plant has poor airflow through its canopy, and poor airflow is exactly the condition fungal disease needs to establish itself. Commercial growers aren't just managing yield when they prune, they're managing risk. Every extra layer of foliage is another surface that stays wet longer after rain or irrigation, another shaded pocket where humidity sits instead of moving through. So the pruning itself is simple enough to describe. Identify the suckers, the shoots emerging from the joint between the main stem and each leaf, and remove them consistently before they get large enough to become their own competing stem. What's not simple, what separates a grower who does this by feel from one who does it with intention, is knowing how far to take it. That's the trade-off from a minute ago playing out for real. Strip too much foliage off a plant sitting in full, intense sun, and you expose the fruit itself to direct light it was never built to handle. The result is sun-scalded, pale, leathery patches on fruit that was otherwise perfect. Damage that happens not because the grower did nothing, but because they did too much of the right thing. That tension, prune enough to focus the plant's energy, but not so much that you strip its own protection away, is the first real skill gap between a hobby garden and a commercial operation. It's not a checklist item, it's a judgment call made dozens of times a week, on dozens of plants, by someone who's watched enough seasons to know where the line sits. And it's the first of 3 decisions that, together, explain that shutdown plant from the opening of this video. But the second decision is where it gets counterintuitive in a completely different way, because the next thing commercial growers do looks, on the surface, like they're throwing away the harvest itself. Picture a cluster of tomatoes on the vine, 6, 7 fruits, all swelling at slightly different rates, all pulling from the same short stem. To a home gardener, that cluster looks like the whole point of growing tomatoes in the first place. More fruit, more harvest. Why would anyone touch it? Here's why. A plant doesn't have unlimited capacity to finish what it starts. Every fruit on that cluster is drawing from the same limited pool of sugars, water, and nutrients the plant is producing at that moment. And the more fruit competing for that pool, the less each individual tomato gets. Depending on the variety, growers typically keep 4 to 7 fruits per cluster. Smaller cherry types can carry the higher end of that range without issue, while larger slicing and beefsteak varieties get thinned down harder, because the sheer physical weight of 6 or 7 full-size tomatoes on one thin stem creates a mechanical problem as much as a nutritional one. The stem can only support so much weight before it strains, bends, or breaks under fruit that never even gets the chance to ripen. So a commercial grower will walk a row and deliberately cut healthy, viable, perfectly good tomatoes off the plant while they're still small, while every one of them looks like it's on its way to a full harvest. It looks like waste. It looks like the opposite of what the entire operation exists to do. But hold that image for a second, because it's the exact mechanism behind the plant from the opening of this video. A tomato plant, like most flowering fruit crops, moves through its life in two competing modes. Early on, it's almost entirely focused on building itself roots, stem structure, leaf area, pure infrastructure. Once it's established, it shifts toward reproduction, flowering, setting fruit, maturing what it's already carrying. A healthy plant needs to keep cycling between these two modes throughout the season. What happens when a grower leaves every single fruit on every single cluster, all season, with no thinning at all? The plant reads that as an emergency, a huge, unfinished reproductive load it has to finish at the cost of nearly everything else it would otherwise be doing. New flowering slows. New growth slows. The plant stops behaving like something with a season ahead of it and starts behaving like something racing to finish what it's already started. That's the plant from the hook. Not a plant that failed. A plant that was never given the chance to rebalance, because nobody removed any of the load it was carrying, and it responded exactly the way a resource-limited organism is supposed to respond when it's overcommitted by shutting down everything except the fruit already in motion. Once that fruit finally matures and comes off the vine, a plant push that far rarely comes roaring back. The window it needed to keep producing has already closed. Thinning a cluster while the fruit is still small looks like a loss in the moment. It isn't. It's the only thing standing between a plant that produces steadily across an entire season and a plant that gambles everything on one enormous harvest and then goes quiet. Commercial growers aren't willing to make that gamble, because a quiet plant in August is a quiet plant for the rest of the season, and that's not a risk anyone selling fruit for a living can afford to take. Suckers remove to focus the plant's energy. Fruit thin to keep that energy cycling instead of collapsing into a single desperate push. Both of those are things you can see cuts you make with your hands, choices visible on the plant itself. The third thing, separating a commercial operation from a backyard garden, is invisible. It's happening in the water before it ever touches the roots, and it's the one variable most home gardeners have never even considered checking. If you're still with me at this point, drop your growing zone in the comments. I want to see how many of you are dealing with the same hard water problem I'm about to walk through, because depending on where you are, this next one might matter more than either of the first two. Every nutrient a tomato plant needs, nitrogen, calcium, magnesium, everything is dissolved in the water, reaching its roots. And every one of those nutrients has a narrow chemical window in which the plant can absorb it. Step outside that window, and it doesn't matter how much of a nutrient is technically present in the soil or the feed solution. The plant simply can't take it up. It's locked out. The thing that determines whether a plant sits inside or outside that window is pH, the acidity or alkalinity of the water and soil the roots are sitting in. Tomatoes prefer a fairly narrow range, 6.0 to 6.8, slightly acidic. Most municipal and well water, by contrast, tends to run more alkaline than that, sometimes significantly more. A grower who never checks this number can do everything else right, perfect pruning, perfect fruit thinning, ideal sun and spacing, and still watch a plant underperform, because the nutrients it needs are sitting right there in the root zone, chemically unavailable, like food behind glass. Correcting it usually means introducing a mild acid into the water supply. Commercial operations most commonly reach for sulfuric acid, the same chemical family used in car batteries, because it's inexpensive and highly effective at bringing pH down even in small doses. Worth saying plainly, sulfuric acid is genuinely hazardous to handle. It's corrosive, it can burn skin and eyes on contact, and the standard safety guidance is consistent eye protection, gloves, protective clothing, and always adding the acid to the water, never the reverse, because doing it backwards can trigger a violent, splashing reaction. This isn't a step to improvise casually in a kitchen or garage. If you're not equipped for that, gentler options like citric acid exist, weaker, more expensive, but far safer to handle for anyone without commercial-grade equipment. Here's the detail that makes this worth sitting through the chemistry for. This single adjustment, done consistently and safely across a season, is one of the clearest differences between a plant that produces at its actual potential and a plant that never gets there, not because anything else was done wrong, but because the nutrients it needed were never reachable in the first place. Pruning and thinning matter almost everywhere. This one matters less in some situations than others. In open ground, with rainfall doing a lot of the diluting and buffering work naturally, pH correction is a smaller lever still worth checking, but not a season-defining variable. In a controlled system, a greenhouse, a hydroponic setup, anywhere the grower is directly controlling every drop of water reaching the roots, it becomes one of the most consequential decisions in the entire operation, because there's no rainfall to buffer a mistake and no soil microbiology quietly correcting the number in the background. That's the honest reason the most aggressive version of this technique belongs to commercial and greenhouse growers specifically. The corrections they make are more precise and handled with equipment and training most home gardeners simply don't have, though the underlying principle, and gentler ways to apply it, still hold true in a backyard bed. Which raises the obvious question. If this is the least dramatic looking of the three techniques, no cutting, no visible change, just a number on a meter, and one that comes with real handling precautions attached, why do growers who've spent decades in this industry treat it as essential rather than optional? Put all three of these together, energy focused instead of scattered across unnecessary growth, fruit load kept in balance instead of allowed to overwhelm the plant, and nutrients kept chemically available instead of locked out by the wrong pH, and you get a plant operating close to what it's actually capable of, rather than a plant fighting itself in three different directions at once. That combination is exactly why the yield numbers coming out of well-run greenhouse operations sound almost implausible to anyone used to backyard results. A typical, well-managed commercial greenhouse operation reports somewhere in the range of 30 to 35 pounds of tomatoes per plant across a season, and the very best performing operations, running every one of these three techniques at a level most growers never bother with, push meaningfully past that. Sit with that number against whatever your own best season has looked like. It's not a number that comes from a better variety, a bigger pot, or some secret fertilizer nobody's telling you about. It's the compounding result of three unglamorous, easy-to-skip decisions made consistently, week after week, for an entire season. One overloaded cluster, one shutdown plant, one season's worth of production that never happened because nobody made the choices that would have prevented it. That's the actual distance between a hobby tomato plant and a commercial one. Not luck, not soil you don't have access to. Three decisions, repeated consistently and handled carefully where the risk calls for it, that most home gardeners have simply never been shown. Everything I've walked through today is the mechanism, the reasoning behind why these three things work. What I haven't shown you yet is what it looks like on a single plant, side by side, over a full season. One plant getting all three of these, one plant getting none of them. Same variety, same bed, same starting point. That comparison is coming, and the difference is bigger than I expected the first time I ran it myself. If you've made it this far, you now know more about what separates a struggling plant from a productive one than most people who've been gardening for years. Try even one of these three this season. Start with sucker removal, since it's the simplest to see and the safest to attempt yourself, and watch what happens to the plant next to the one you leave alone. Subscribe now so you don't miss where that plant ends up, and drop a comment with which of these three you're trying first this season. I'll check back in when the harvest numbers are in. See you in the next one.